Mwazu Magaji, who's an APC national stakeholder and also former member of the APC Presidential Campaign Council. You're welcome to our studios this morning.
Thanks for having me, Mofe.
How did you receive the news of the president? Some have said this is a major reshuffle. Some have tagged it wielding the big stick. All manner of headlines. But how did this news hit you?
Well, in all honesty, I was surprised that the president could even actually come to terms with the structure of adjusting the government, because it seems as if the first term we didn't have any major reshuffle, major changes. So he actually making adjustment in the council itself is a very clear indication of the sensitivities that is creeping into the president's style of leadership. There are a lot of changes. I remember when we had the last interview here, we made a lot of discussion on changing the service chiefs and the security situation and all that, and how the president can bring some dynamism into his government. And now I think this changes with a very clear statement that it's going to be a continuous process, has shown that democracy is about people, it's about performance, it's about deliverables. And I like the fact that Femi Adesina has clearly stated that there are parameters. What I wanted that parameters to be brought out, it's like what they haven't done is to say, these are the baseline when we came, and this is when you were appointed, and there are very clear KPIs, key performance indicators, that will be used to measure your performance upfront. When you do that, you avoid all the discussion and all the dodging he's doing. An individual can assess himself based on a very clear parameters of performance. You see, when you put an input in a particular system, there will be an output, and there will be an outcome, and there will be impact. These are all captured in the key performance indicators.
Yeah, but the key performance indicators do not have to be for the Nigerian people, do they?
No. In a democracy, these people have been brought in, like he rightly said, first they serve at the liberty of the president. So they were brought on board because the president wanted to help us. That's what the Constitution said. But when they are actually appointed, the retreat that they had needed to communicate the 9 areas that have been very clear, the key performance indicators, the baseline parameters of those 9 areas. This is the reason. You do not have to argue about who does what or who does well or didn't do well, because the indicators are there. For example, in the case of these 2 ministers, the power sector has been a very critical element of the 9 areas, like he rightly pointed out. And there are parameters that are very clear: generation, transmission, distribution, revenue, performance, and commercial viability of the discourse, for example. And all of these parameters will be lined up. We have a baseline. Like he said, every single day we have reports from the power sector that shows how much power you've generated, what are your stranded power, and what's your transmission challenges, where are your gencos having problem, what is the gas supply problems, what are the hydro challenges in terms of low water supply, or what is the overall health of this power sector. I would like to say that if you look at the 5-year parameters, 5 years ago, and you look at today, believe me, you will not see significant change except for stranded power. Basically, as at yesterday, the grid basically had less than 4,000 in terms of megawatts. 5 years ago, there was more than 4,000 on the grid. I mean, this is a clear KPI. What do you do with power? You give it to people. If you can't give power to the people, then there are issues. You are not either generating well, or you're not transmitting well, or you're not distributing well. Then there are issues of discourse. The discourse were actually privatized about 7 years ago. They were supposed to be reviewed 5 years after presentation. They were reviewed, and it was very clear they were not doing well. And for whatever reason, they were let to continue the way they were going. People were complaining, and there were all sorts of increase in terms of tariffs, in terms of power, without corresponding services. And also major project in the power sector. He mentioned Mambila. One of the key reasons the Minister of Power came on board was Mambila. Mambila was suffering from sort of prioritizations and commitment, and there was an engineer who was brought in on board from Taraba State, where Mambila resides, a $5.8 billion project, billion-dollar project that is supposed to be #1 African project in terms of power, in terms of cost. But he came and he grappled with it. What I'm even surprised is how he was allowed to stay for this long, while clearly he could not move either the major project in the power sector forward. He could not bring service delivery into efficient mode. He could not bring in new projects or new generations that will come on board. The transmission grid lock was still in existence and still is in existence, and the discos have not been delivering and they're not being efficient, and we're allowed to continue this way. So for me, it is all about going forward. I would like Femi Adesina to just sit down and say, look, the president is the president of the country and he appointed these ministers. But the customers of these ministers are Nigerians. So Femi, as the chief spokesperson of the government, should actually extract these KPIs from these ministers on a quarterly basis, publish them. And these KPIs that are very clear, that are used in this retreat and this review for changing these two ministers, should actually be made clear to the people so that we can be assessing and giving feedback as well. This is democracy, for God's sake.
Interestingly, I mean, we saw a change in terms of how the ministers engage with government. I mean, on a weekly basis now, or maybe bi-weekly basis, we see that, you know, certain ministers or top government functionaries are invited to the villa to brief the press and take questions on the key areas of their deliverables, so to speak. So I imagine that, you know, he's already trying to do
Changes,
that.
yes.
Yes.
So this is the key issue
with Nigerians.
So when they are briefing Nigerians, we should have some measurement of what they are saying. I mean, there was a promise, and then there is a deliverables. We will see percentage changes in where we were last week or last month or last quarter. Usually this type of major shift is quarterly, so that you give time for people to apply themselves and attain some result. And the most important thing here, to be honest, is we have some changes. And the president said it's going to continue. I'm very happy to realize that.
You're holding on to that?
I am holding on to that because we were not having that before. Remember, the changes in the service chiefs took a lot of pressure, a lot of dynamics before it happened.
Has it yielded the desired results?
I believe that. I believe sincerely, like you said, that security changed mode. The Boko Haram problem, the insurgency around Boko Haram, have some containment strategy around. Now, what happened is that there are other security challenges that manifested, which need to be tackled in a different way. I mean, the herdsmen issue, the kidnappings, and all the issues related to agitations around nationalism. These are issues that will be a dynamic challenges to the nation, but they need to be tackled differently.
But you've talked about KPIs. For a number of people, you know that the appointment of ministers, yes, how will I put it now? Antecedents are important. However, political considerations are sometimes bigger.
Yes.
And, you know, you heard Mr. Adesina talk about how sensitive the president is in terms of letting people off the appointment. I mean, he thinks that it needs to be handled delicately. So what are your thoughts in terms of how the president's style, it will seem, his seeming reluctance to let people go, and what impact would you say that has had on his own administration?
I think we've complained for a very long time that there are no consequence management in this administration. And consequence management does not mean negative. It could also be a reward and recognition system. I mean, look, I understand that a minister is not necessarily an expert of the subject matter he's managing. For example, we have Fashola, a lawyer managing works. Roads and bridges are going on, albeit very slowly, but they are going on. Amechi is managing transport sector. I mean, all the railway projects are coming on, and the infrastructure are all coming up. So we can see there are movements in terms of that sector. If you look at infrastructure, if you look at security, if you look at the economy is interesting, by the way. This is very important as one of the major 9 key areas. I mean, we have a GDP jump of 5.2 or so, and we have serious challenges with development economics that affect the people. So I would like to congratulate the federal government for attaining a GDP increase, but I would like to point out that the GDP need to translate to quality of life, the well-being of citizens. For example, we have issues related to our exchange rate, which means everything we are importing becomes more expensive, and we all know we have not yet, and that's another weakness, developed a manufacturing and production capability that basically substantially reduce our import, which means we are dependent on very expensive import. There is inflation, there is unemployment, there is issues related to this social investment that we are injecting money. Also need to have a template and a framework of a very clear KPI. How much did you put and what did you generate? Most of this social investment, in my view, are consuming so much billions without corresponding economic impact in terms of productivity and employment. For example, if you want to employ 20,000 graduates, like the federal government is planning to do now, instead of bringing them on board like Empower, giving them allowances on a monthly basis, if you accumulate that amount and put it in a bank as a guarantee and start selecting existing enterprise that have succeeded in the market but needed scaling up, needed capital, needed expertise, and put a structure of supporting them, they will employ 2, 5, 10 people. And if you accumulate that, you will have 50,000 people in a sustainable enterprise space that you will not have to let go because they are employed and the company will exist even after you leave. That is how you grow economy. Countries with large population like India, like China, like Nigeria, like Indonesia and Brazil have developed this sustainable enterprise support mechanism. But we are doing the opposite. We're doing what the Europeans are doing, basically social safety net. But the social safety net of Europe already have a structure and a backbone of existence. So when you put in money, you are only supporting people to exist and inject money into the economy so the economy will start growing. And you do it for a very short period of time. When the economy grows, generate employment, you withdraw that. You can't do that in Nigeria. If you put somebody on a 30,000 monthly for 2 years, you are addicting the person to free money. If you withdraw that, you are telling the person to go and look for 30,000 in whichever way. That is not going to help us in the near future. So I would like this program to change. Now, to go back to another sector, I've analyzed power. The other minister that has been relieved is agriculture. I know the man. I've spoken to him. He has a fantastic idea. He has a challenge. And the challenge is generational. The dynamic of the industry, the dynamics of agriculture require a lot more agile, more viable, more healthy, more younger people. Agriculture is a business now. I mean, the gentleman is a very good person, but he deserves to retire and rest. His age mates are all resting very well. Now, you brought him into an agriculture where even if you want to run one farm, you have to be in the farm every day. You have to supervise your farm. Agriculture is such a huge dynamic space that require. I'm glad that Dr. Mahmoud has been moved. I know Dr. Mahmoud as well. He is younger, he is more agile, and I believe he is passionate about young people. He also knows a lot of the president's network. So I believe this will make a change in the agricultural sector. The problem that Femi was hesitant to admit was the KPIs that I have outlined in power are also very clear in agriculture. In agriculture, we pumped so much billions through CVN intervention, through NASAL, through all sort of anchor borrower schemes. Today, in newspaper, there are issues related to the anchor borrower loan not being paid back as seen as a national cake. Now, the reason that happened was either the criteria was not properly structured, it was actually done on a kind of patronage system that is a man-to-man kind of style, or the enterprise was not fully supported. I had a discussion with one of my colleagues, Dr. Ahmed in Port Harcourt, and I said to him 2 years ago that the agri policy of the president of closing border and injecting money is very good. However, the problem will be when you come to scale up, when you do anchor borrower for 20, 50,000 people, and it succeeds. 1 hectare of rice was producing 4 tons of paddy rice before, and now you're producing 8 to 10 tons. That's good. All the agricultural practices are right. All the equipment and mechanizations are right, and the knowledge brought in, and the seedlings are now the right. What you now need to do...
There are questions as to who has benefited from that particular program, because, you know, at the end of the day, there was a lot of talk around border countries, I mean, neighboring countries coming to, you know, take our grains because they were far cheaper.
Correct. So that's what I'm saying is, when you put a policy, the key focus of the energy and the agri sector is security of our country. Energy security and food security. I think those 2 ministers missed that target. That's why the president relieved them. Energy, clearly, we are not secured. We are selling gas to Europe, we are not using gas. We have no power, so we cannot produce. We are dependent on import because we can't produce. The power is not there, no employment. There are a lot of issues related to power. The same thing with agriculture. If you cannot produce what you eat, and then you structure production for export. You cannot be exporting what you produce for your people and then importing what you want to eat. That is a very warped way. When the border was closed, it was a good policy until it gets to a point where the stimulation mechanism of the production was not sufficient, was not able to catalyze production enough to basically import substitutes what we eat in the country. So I think it's very clear now. The task before these two new ministers is energy security. Whatever we do, when we sell gas to Europe, we must provide gas to Nigeria. When we generate power, we should stimulate production. When we have an agricultural policy, whatever it is, it must focus on employment generation and making agri a business, as well as food sufficiency and food security for the country.
Well, the question I asked earlier is about the politics of it. I mean, relieving ministers, we understand that these ministers are close associates of the president. Yeah. And I'm sure he must have considered also his personal friendship with them.
Correct.
You know, how heavy a consideration is that in politics?
Well, it's very, very heavy, because at the end of the day, you have the election ahead of you. When you select a minister...
It's not his election.
No, well, he is the leader now of the party. He doesn't want to lose this election. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, his election is his election, but now he has a legacy to leave behind. And I've had many, many senior members of the party, the Senate President, the Vice Presidents, members of the party, myself, a lot of people have said, if the president leaves, APC may likely collapse, because he happens to be the backbone. There are two of them, himself and Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Bola Ahmed Tinubu is under intense pressure in the party now. I don't know why, but I do know that these two people were the pillars of APC. And if the president leaves and Tinubu is not very happy, then APC is gone. But this is the point of consideration in terms of the way the ministers are brought in. You can consider politics to get constituency endorsement and support. But the minister should be capable of bringing experts around him. He is heading a bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy is well-trained and well-groomed, that if standards are set, I mean the directors, the permanent secretaries, the civil servants under the ministry, these are very well-trained people. I have worked as commissioner before, and I've come to understand that if you want to sleep, the public service, the bureaucracy will bring mattress for you and a pillow and probably find you to sleep. If you want to run, believe me, they are going to buy tracksuits and a very nice pair of sneakers and follow you run. They know how to do everything. If you want to find a way of messing up the system, they are good in that. There are different set of people. So there are people who know how to mess up the system. There are people who know how to move the system. The public service is rich, but it's on both ways. So the point I'm making is, even if you are brought in on political consideration, what you now need to do is to assemble your best in the ministry. You need to understand you came in to deliver something. So you give people time to show themselves. And I think that is natural. There are people who have different expertise, there are people who have skills, there are people who have social skills, technical skills, and different type of expertise. They are all in the ministry.
How do you think this is going to affect, even though, yes, some people will say that the rejigging has happened within the cabinet, not new people have been brought from outside. These people have been attending cabinet meetings, so they possibly understand some of the challenges and the expectations that have been placed on their shoulders in these new ministries that they're now going to be heading. However, they will still have to take time to understand the dynamics of the workplace. Isn't that correct? And
it
the
is correct,
as well.
but
So how do you think that is going to affect the deliverables which would be expected of them in perhaps a short while?
Yeah, what you said is an advantage, the fact that they've been in council, so the procedures of council and approvals and memos are not strange to them. What is new is the ministry. And usually you change ministers. When you change ministers, the style of leading a ministry is the same in terms of getting results. However, you just need to study the ministry and the personnel for just a week or two. Call for a meeting, interact with them, talk to them, set your agenda, clearly share your vision and the vision of the president, and see how you can get them to be on board with this vision.
The question I'm asking is, don't you think that that's also going to take its own time?
Yeah, you can do all of this in 2 weeks. The other thing also is the engineer that is brought into power is an experienced engineer. He is very capable. He has also worked with Fashola, so there are styles that he may have picked as well. He has his own style and he has his own expertise, and he's a very calm, collected gentleman, to be honest with you. I am confident that we will move power sector a lot more faster now than what it was under Salamama. And like I said about Dr. Mahmoud, is much younger, much more dynamic, and is passionate about people. Because agriculture is about people as well. When you have passion about people, you tend to bring policies that will empower them and feed them and give them opportunity for enterprise to grow in the agri sector. So I mean, honestly, there is no time left. It's less than 2 years now. But in the next 1 year, properly focused, we can look at security, infrastructure, the energy sector, the agri sector, and a lot of other sectors out of the 9 sectors, and we bring out the KPIs. I mean, there is a wording in that statement that was released by Mr. President, consolidating on his legacy projects. This is very important. The president is conscious and thinking about legacy.
Well, he already did say that he doesn't want to leave the office as a failure.
As a failure, exactly.
Yes,
so this is the time to tighten supervision, monitoring, measurement, and evaluation. This is the time for feedback as well.
Let's take questions now from my colleagues in Lagos. Gentlemen.
Well, Mr. Mazu, I mean, being in politics, you know the time is of essence. Now that he says, well, we need to consolidate on those legacy projects. For you, when would you like to see, because when he says this will continue, do you have a time frame, you know, within which you think all of this continuation should end such that the people can have time to get down to work and achieve? Because look, end of this year, next year, you know how politics is. And so if the phase of those political activities start, can they still have the time to deliver on these policy projects?
Thank you very much. This is a very important question. I believe that in politics, there is another milestone for relieving officials in government, which is basically as political contest approach. In my view, by October of this year, Mr. President should evaluate and ask his cabinet members, who amongst you wants to contest election? Who amongst you is interested in any sort of contest? So that I can relieve you, thank you, and actually allow you to go and get your people's consent and mandate so that you become electable. We are not just imposing you on the people. So I think, yes, a lot more will come, especially regarding people who want to contest election. And I believe that between October to the end of this year, every individual who wants to contest election should be relieved of his position so that he will utilize 2022 effectively for campaign. The other area is, as long as there are criteria, as we now understand, that sectors are being measured and monitored, I will still say that on a quarterly basis, that's at the end of next quarter, which is basically between October to December, the president should call for a retreat and actually review exactly where the government is in terms of these 9 areas. And the president should clearly outline. At the end of Femi Adesina's interview, he mentioned some very clear deliverables of every sector. Those deliverables can be documented and will be a dashboard. And every minister will have a template that will be used to populate, and every 3 months, Femi Adesina will talk to Nigerians on the performance each ministry, and also that will help track the legacy of Mr. President and ensure that if there are gaps and there are challenges the minister is facing, they will be addressed. What is very important is the fact that there was a haggling between whether it's the president or the people that should actually ask for accountability from the ministers. I honestly believe that in a democracy, the system is such that everything revolves around the people. The president appointed these ministers to help him deliver, but the only way reliable feedback can be obtained is from people. And I was a bit scared when I heard that he went at some point and the president said, I know this one, or I get feedback from my constituents. The presidents have the whole Nigeria as his constituents. When the president say, I know that the president knows a lot. But believe me, there are a lot of things that have changed between the time he was head of states, when he was military leader, when he was in PTA. There are a lot of dynamics that have changed. And Nigeria have degenerated a lot to actually warrant a very close supervision of projects. And I want to also say that the constituents giving president feedback, we don't know them. We don't know who they represent. We don't know what their interest is. So as an institution, we need to open up and democratically discuss the KPIs, the key performance indicators of these ministers, give us the opportunity to evaluate them. The president may or may not use our own evaluation because he has other institutions of government to evaluate them. But this is very important in a democracy.
Well, we have to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Mr. Muazu Magaji is an APC national stakeholder and also a former member of the All Progressives Congress Presidential Campaign Council. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohe.